Mother Bear gave birth to a cub in front of this home. What this human baby did put everyone in shock. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new to our channel. The morning sun crept slowly over the pine trees, casting long shadows across the Wilsons' backyard. Emma Wilson stood by the kitchen window, coffee cup warming her hands as she gazed out at the misty forest behind their home. The family had moved to this secluded cabin in Montana just 3 months ago, hoping to raise their 10-month-old son Noah away from the noise and pollution of city life. Emma took another sip of coffee, enjoying the peaceful moment before Noah would wake up. Her husband Daniel was still sleeping upstairs after working late into the night on his latest wildlife photography project. This quiet morning ritual had become precious to Emma, just her, the rising sun, and the whispers of the forest. But today was different. As Emma's eyes drifted across their spacious backyard, she noticed something moving near the old oak tree at the edge of their property. She squinted, trying to make out the dark shape in the morning light. Her breath caught in her throat. A massive black bear was pacing slowly back and forth under the tree, making strange, pained sounds. Emma's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. Bears weren't uncommon in these parts, but they usually kept their distance from homes. This one seemed distressed, and distressed wild animals were unpredictable. She should wake Daniel. They should call someone. But before Emma could move, the bear collapsed onto its side beneath the oak tree. Its massive body heaved with effort, and Emma suddenly understood what was happening. The mother bear wasn't injured or angry. She was in labor. "Daniel," Emma called, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the bear might hear her through the glass. "Daniel, come down here, quick." The bear writhed on the ground, powerful legs kicking at the earth as contractions shook her body. Emma had given birth herself less than a year ago, and something about the bear's struggle stirred a deep connection within her. The powerful creature seemed suddenly vulnerable, fighting through pain to bring new life into the world. Daniel rushed down the stairs, camera in hand as always. "What's wrong?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Emma pointed toward the window without speaking. Daniel followed her gaze, his mouth dropping open as he spotted the laboring bear. "Is she—" he started. "Yes." Emma nodded, unable to look away. "She's having her cubs, right there in our yard." Daniel instinctively raised his camera, then lowered it again. "This feels too private somehow," he whispered. The professional wildlife photographer who had spent years trying to capture intimate moments of nature was now witnessing something so rare, so precious, that it felt wrong to document it. As they watched in silent awe, a soft cry came from upstairs. Noah was awake. "I'll get him," Daniel said, but Emma touched his arm. "Bring him down here," she said. "I know it sounds crazy, but I want him to see this." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. A few moments later, he returned with their sleepy-eyed baby boy cradled in his arms. Noah rubbed his tiny fists against his eyes, his curly brown hair sticking up in all directions. Emma took Noah from Daniel's arms and carried him to the window. "Look, sweetie," she whispered, pointing to the bear. "Look at the mama bear." Noah's eyes widened as he spotted the large animal. Instead of crying or turning away, he pressed his small hands against the glass, completely captivated. The family stood frozen at the window, 3 human hearts beating rapidly as they witnessed the wild struggle of birth playing out in their own backyard. The mother bear growled deeply as she pushed, her powerful body trembling with each contraction. Emma found herself whispering words of encouragement, as if the bear could somehow hear her through the glass. "You can do it," she breathed. "You're so strong, just a little more." Noah seemed to sense the importance of the moment. The usually active baby was completely still in Emma's arms, his eyes never leaving the bear as she fought to bring her cub into the world. And then, just as the sun fully cleared the tops of the pine trees, it happened. A tiny, wet bundle slid onto the grass beneath the oak tree. The mother bear immediately turned her massive body, gently nuzzling and licking the newborn cub. The contrast between her enormous size and the delicate care she showed her baby brought tears to Emma's eyes. "She did it," Emma whispered, bouncing Noah gently in her arms. "Look at that, Noah. She had her baby, just like I had you." Noah stared at the mother bear and her cub, his expression serious and focused in a way Emma had never seen before. Then, without warning, the baby did something that would change everything about this already extraordinary morning. Noah laughed. It wasn't his usual baby giggle. It was a full, joyful laugh that rang out clear and loud. Emma and Daniel froze, their eyes darting from their son to the massive predator just yards away from their home. The mother bear's head snapped up at the sound, her dark eyes locking directly on the window where the family stood. Emma's heart stopped. She took an instinctive step back from the window, clutching Noah tighter to her chest. Daniel moved protectively in front of them, his body tense. The bear stared directly at them, her eyes intelligent and alert despite her exhaustion. For one terrible moment, Emma was certain the bear would charge the house, driven by maternal instinct to protect her newborn from potential threats. But what happened next left them all speechless. The mother bear, still holding their gaze, gently nudged her tiny cub closer to her body. Then, to the Wilsons' complete astonishment, she raised her massive head toward the window and made a soft huffing sound, almost like a greeting. Noah laughed again, reaching his arms toward the window as if trying to touch the bear and her cub. And the bear, defying everything Emma and Daniel knew about wild animal behavior, remained calm, watching the human baby with what looked remarkably like curiosity. "Daniel," Emma whispered, "what's happening?" Daniel shook his head slowly, his photographer's eye recognizing something profound unfolding before them. I think they're connecting somehow." For several minutes, the young family and the bear family regarded each other across the yard. Two mothers, two fathers, for surely the cub's father was somewhere in these woods, two babies, separated by glass and species, but somehow sharing in this miracle of new life. Then, still keeping her eyes on the window, the mother bear carefully picked up her cub in her mouth. With one last look at the humans watching from inside, she turned and lumbered slowly back toward the forest, her precious new baby safe in her jaws. As she disappeared among the trees, Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Noah was still reaching toward the window, making soft babbling sounds as if trying to call the bear back. "Did that really just happen?" Daniel asked, his voice filled with wonder. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She had just witnessed something she would never forget, a moment of understanding between two worlds that rarely connected so peacefully. That night, after putting Noah to bed, Emma and Daniel sat on their porch, staring out at the dark forest. "Do you think we'll see them again?" Emma asked softly. Daniel squeezed her hand. "I don't know, but I hope so." As if in answer, a distant huffing sound echoed from the trees. Emma smiled through her tears, feeling somehow that the mother bear was saying good night. And upstairs, as if sensing the moment, baby Noah laughed in his sleep. Days passed, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about the mother bear and her cub. Every morning, she found herself standing by the same window, coffee in hand, scanning the edge of the forest. Daniel teased her gently about becoming the bear lookout, but she could tell he was just as affected by what they had witnessed. He had started a new photography project focusing on local wildlife mothers and their young, inspired by the connection they had seen between Noah and the bear cub. "I keep wondering if she chose our yard on purpose," Emma said one evening as they sat on the porch swing. The summer air was warm against their skin, filled with the gentle symphony of crickets and distant owl calls. "Of all the places in the forest, why here?" Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Bears are intelligent." Maybe she sensed it was safe. Or maybe it wasn't about safety at all, Emma whispered. Maybe it was about connection. Noah was growing more active by the day, pulling himself up on furniture and babbling constantly. Emma noticed that he still gravitated toward the kitchen window, pressing his tiny hands against the glass and staring out at the oak tree where the bear had given birth. Sometimes he would make the same joyful laugh they had heard that morning, as if remembering his unusual friend. One afternoon, while Noah napped, Emma decided to walk to the edge of their property. She approached the old oak tree cautiously, feeling a strange reverence as she stood where the mother bear had brought new life into the world. The grass had sprung back up, leaving no physical evidence of what had happened, but Emma could feel something different in the air. She knelt down, running her fingers over the earth. "Thank you for sharing that moment with us," she whispered to the absent bear. "I hope you and your baby are safe." As Emma stood to return to the house, something caught her eye. A single black bear hair nestled in the bark of the tree. She carefully extracted it, holding it up to the sunlight. It seemed like a gift somehow, a tangible reminder that the magical morning hadn't been a dream. That night, Emma gently taped the bear hair inside Noah's baby book, alongside a note describing what they had witnessed. Someday, when he was older, she would tell him the story of how he had laughed at a mother bear and her newborn cub, and how, against all odds, the bear had seemed to understand. Summer faded into autumn, painting the forest in brilliant shades of red and gold. Emma had almost given up hope of ever seeing the bear again when the encounter happened. She had taken Noah for a walk along the trail near their home, something they did almost every day. The fresh air was good for both of them, and Noah loved watching the leaves spiral down from the trees. Emma kept him secured in his carrier, humming softly as they walked deeper into the woods than they usually ventured. The trail curved around a small clearing filled with wild blackberry bushes. Emma stopped, admiring how the late afternoon sun filtered through the branches. That's when she heard it. A familiar huffing sound that made her heart leap into her throat. On the other side of the clearing, partially hidden by the berry bushes, stood the mother bear. And beside her, tumbling playfully through the fallen leaves, was her cub. No longer the tiny, wet bundle they had seen months ago, but a curious, energetic young bear exploring the world around him. Emma froze, holding her breath. She knew she should back away slowly, avoid eye contact, make herself as non-threatening as possible. All the bear safety rules Daniel had drilled into her when they first moved to Montana. But before she could move, Noah let out a happy squeal, recognizing the bears before Emma had even pointed them out. The mother bear's head snapped up at the sound, her dark eyes locking onto Emma and Noah. The cub immediately scrambled back to its mother's side, peering curiously from behind her massive front leg. Time seemed to stand still as woman and bear regarded each other across the clearing. Emma's mind raced with fear and wonder. She slowly began to step backward, planning to retreat down the trail, when something stopped her. The mother bear wasn't showing any signs of aggression. Her ears weren't flattened, her teeth weren't bared. Instead, she was watching them with the same curious expression Emma had seen on that remarkable morning months ago. Noah babbled excitedly in his carrier, pointing at the bears with his chubby fingers. The bear cub made a soft whining sound, as if responding to Noah's greeting. Then the mother bear did something that left Emma breathless. She sat down in the clearing, her cub still partially hidden behind her, and continued to watch them. It wasn't the behavior of a threatened animal or an aggressive predator. It was almost like she was inviting them to share the space, to acknowledge each other's presence. Emma found herself whispering, "Hello again. Your baby has grown so big." The bear huffed softly, nudging her cub gently with her nose. The young bear hesitantly stepped out from behind its mother, tumbling slightly on the uneven ground. Noah laughed that same special laugh from months before, and to Emma's astonishment the bear cub tilted its head at the sound, seeming almost as curious about the human baby as Noah was about him. "Daniel will never believe this," Emma murmured, wishing desperately that her husband was there with his camera to document this extraordinary moment. For several minutes, the two mothers and their young ones existed in peaceful observation of each other. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes at the profound simplicity of it. Two different worlds, meeting without fear. Eventually, a distant sound, perhaps another hiker on the trail, caused the mother bear's ears to perk up. With a final huff in their direction, she gently guided her cub away from the clearing and back into the dense forest. Emma remained rooted to the spot, her legs trembling with adrenaline and wonder. What had just happened defied everything she thought she knew about wild animals. This wasn't just a random encounter. The mother bear had recognized them, had chosen to share that moment rather than flee or fight. When she finally found the strength to walk home, Emma's mind was racing. She couldn't wait to tell Daniel what she had seen, though she knew he might worry about how close she and Noah had come to the bears. But something told her there had been no danger, not with this particular bear, not after what they had shared. Over dinner that night, Daniel listened in amazement as Emma recounted the encounter in the clearing. "It was like she remembered us, Daniel. She could have charged or run away, but instead she just sat there, and her cub and Noah were so curious about each other. It was magical." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his expression a mixture of concern and fascination. "Emma, that's incredible, but also terrifying. They're still wild animals." "I know," Emma nodded, watching as Noah happily mashed sweet potatoes between his fingers. "But this feels different. It's like we have some kind of connection with them." Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching his son. "Noah does seem to have a special way with animals. Remember how Mrs. Peterson's dog stopped barking whenever Noah laughed?" Emma smiled. "He has an old soul, I think." That night, after Noah was asleep, Daniel pulled out his laptop and began researching bear behavior. "There are documented cases of bears recognizing specific humans," he told Emma as she joined him on the couch, "especially in areas where they've had positive or neutral interactions." "See," Emma said triumphantly, "I'm not crazy." Daniel chuckled, pulling her close. "No, you're not crazy, but we should still be careful. Even a bear that recognizes us is unpredictable." Emma nodded against his shoulder. "I know. But I can't help feeling like this is important somehow, like we're witnessing something special." "We are," Daniel agreed softly, "and I think it's changing us." He was right. Since the morning they watched the bear give birth, something had shifted in their family. They had always appreciated living close to nature, but now they felt a deeper responsibility to protect it, to understand their place within it rather than apart from it. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the forest in pristine white snow. Emma worried about the mother bear and her cub, even though Daniel assured her that black bears were well adapted to Montana winters, finding cozy dens to hibernate through the coldest months. "I hope they have a good den," Emma said one snowy evening, gazing out at the forest from their living room window. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow. "They do," Daniel reassured her. "Bears are experts at surviving winter." Noah, now almost walking on his own, toddled over to the window and pressed his hand against the cold glass, as if searching for his unusual friends in the snowy landscape. "Bah," he said clearly, his first real attempt at a word. "Bah." Emma and Daniel exchanged startled glances. "Did he just—" Daniel began. "Bah," Noah repeated more insistently, pointing out the window. Emma knelt beside her son. "Are you saying bear, sweetie? Are you looking for the bears?" Noah's face lit up with a grin, recognizing that his parents understood him. "Bah, bah." Daniel laughed, scooping Noah up into his arms. "That's right, buddy. The bears are sleeping now, but they'll come back in the spring." That night, as Emma wrote in Noah's baby book, she added a special note. First word, bear, December 12th. It seemed fitting somehow that Noah's first word wasn't mama or dada, but a tribute to the extraordinary connection they had witnessed. As winter deepened, Emma found herself dreaming about the bears almost every night. In her dreams, she could communicate with the mother bear, understanding her thoughts and feelings. They would sit together under the old oak tree, watching their children play without fear or boundaries between them. She would wake from these dreams feeling peaceful, as if she had gained some insight that her waking mind couldn't quite grasp. Daniel noticed the change in her. "You seem different," he commented one morning as they watched the sunrise paint the snowy landscape in pastel colors. Emma considered this. "I feel different," she admitted. "It's like seeing the bear give birth, and then meeting her again in the forest. It opened something inside me, a different way of seeing the world." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I've been feeling it too. It's affected my photography. I'm seeing things I never noticed before. Connections between animals and their environment, patterns I was blind to." His latest collection, titled Mothers, had been accepted by a prestigious nature magazine. The editors had been particularly struck by the emotional depth of his images, the way he captured the tender interactions between animal mothers and their young. Though he hadn't included any photos of their bear, it had felt too personal, too sacred to share. Her spirit infused all of his work now. Spring arrived with a rush of new life. The forest behind their home transformed from stark white to vibrant green almost overnight, it seemed. Wildflowers carpeted the forest floor, and the air was filled with the songs of returning birds. Emma felt a growing anticipation as the days lengthened. Would the bears return from hibernation? Would they see the mother and her cub again, now nearly a year old? She found herself watching the forest edge more frequently, hoping for a glimpse of their unusual friends. Noah, now walking confidently and adding new words to his vocabulary every day, still looked out the kitchen window each morning, saying, "Bah, bah," with hopeful expectation. "The bears might not come back to our yard, sweetie," Emma tried to explain gently. "They have their own home in the forest." But Noah seemed unconvinced, his faith in the bear's return unshakable. It was Daniel who spotted them first. He had been in his small photography studio at the back of the house when he rushed into the kitchen, his eyes wide with excitement. "They're back," he whispered, taking Emma's hand. "Come see." Heart pounding, Emma followed him to the studio window. Noah toddled after them, sensing their excitement. At the edge of their property, near the same old oak tree where it had all begun, stood the mother bear. Beside her was her cub, no longer tiny but still clearly young, exploring the spring growth with playful curiosity. The mother bear appeared to be watching the house, her posture relaxed and unthreatening. It's like she's visiting, Emma breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Bah! Noah exclaimed, reaching toward the window. Bah! At the sound of his voice, both bears looked directly at the house. The mother bear made her familiar huffing sound, and the cub tilted its head curiously. I need to document this, Daniel said, reaching slowly for his camera. No one will believe it otherwise. With steady hands, he began photographing the extraordinary scene. The bears watching the house, seeming to recognize it and its inhabitants. The mother bear didn't flee or show any signs of discomfort as Daniel moved carefully behind the window, capturing image after image. Noah pressed his face against the glass, laughing his special laugh. The bear cub responded by standing on its hind legs, peering curiously toward the sound. They remember us, Emma whispered, tears filling her eyes. They actually remember. Daniel nodded, too overwhelmed to speak as he continued photographing the moment. For nearly half an hour, the bears remained at the edge of the yard. The mother grazed peacefully on new spring growth while her cub explored, occasionally looking toward the house as if checking that the humans were still watching. Finally, with what seemed like reluctance, the mother bear gently nudged her cub, guiding him back toward the deeper forest. Before disappearing among the trees, she paused, looking directly at the window where the family stood. Emma raised her hand in a small wave, and the bear huffed one more time before vanishing into the green shadows. I've never heard of anything like this, Daniel said, his voice filled with wonder as he reviewed the images on his camera. Bears don't usually do this. They don't visit people. They don't remember houses. But she does, Emma said softly, bouncing Noah gently in her arms. She remembers us because we shared something special. Daniel looked at his wife and son, his expression thoughtful. Do you think we should tell someone about this? A wildlife researcher or conservationist might find it valuable. Emma considered this. Part of her wanted to keep their bear connection private, a special secret just for their family. But another part recognized that what they were witnessing might be important for understanding bears better, for fostering greater protection for these remarkable animals. Maybe, she said slowly, but only someone who would respect them, who wouldn't try to track them or tag them or turn them into a tourist attraction. Daniel nodded in agreement. I know just the person. Dr. Evelyn Barrett at the university. She studies bear behavior and advocates for wildlife corridors and protection. She would understand the significance without exploiting it. As they discussed the possibility, Noah wriggled in Emma's arms, pointing insistently toward the forest. Bah, he said again, his face alight with joy. Bah back. Emma hugged him close, marveling at the innocent wisdom of her child. That's right, sweetie. The bears came back to say hello. That night, Emma added a new entry to Noah's baby book, alongside a print of one of Daniel's photographs showing the mother bear and her cub looking toward their home. Today, the bears returned to visit us. Noah recognized them immediately. Something extraordinary is happening between our son and these wild creatures, a connection that defies explanation but fills our hearts with wonder. Perhaps Noah understands something about the natural world that we, as adults, have forgotten. Whatever it is, we're grateful to be witnesses to this remarkable friendship between a human child and a bear cub, born on the same spring morning under the old oak tree. As she closed the book, Emma glanced out the bedroom window at the moonlit forest. Somewhere out there, the mother bear was curled around her cub, perhaps dreaming bear dreams of the strange human family who had shared in her most vulnerable moment, and become, against all odds, something like friends. Emma smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over her. The world was full of more magic and connection than most people ever realized. How fortunate they were to have glimpsed it, to be reminded that the boundaries between human and wild were perhaps not as fixed as most believed. And in his crib down the hall, Noah slept soundly, dreaming of his bear friends and the forest that had become as much a part of his story as the human world around him. A week later, Dr. Evelyn Barrett sat at their kitchen table, her eyes wide with wonder as she reviewed Daniel's photographs. The wildlife biologist had driven 3 hours from the university after Daniel had sent her a carefully worded email about their experiences. In all my 20 years studying black bears, I've never documented anything quite like this, she said, her finger tracing the outline of the mother bear in one of the images. Bears generally avoid human dwellings unless there's food involved. And returning to the same location where she gave birth, that's extraordinary behavior. Emma poured more coffee into Dr. Barrett's mug. We haven't put out any food or tried to attract them. They just chose us somehow. Noah played on the kitchen floor nearby, stacking wooden blocks only to knock them down with delighted giggles. Dr. Barrett watched him curiously. And you say the cub was born the same morning as your son first saw the bears? Daniel nodded. We didn't realize the significance at first, but yes, Noah had just turned 10 months old when the mother bear gave birth in our yard. They've essentially grown up in parallel. Dr. Barrett made a note in her journal. There's a phenomenon documented in some indigenous cultures, a belief in animal kinship, where a child and an animal born in close proximity share a special connection. Most scientists dismiss these stories as folklore, but she gestured at the photographs spread across the table. These images suggest something profound is happening. Emma watched Noah playing, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and wonder. What should we do? We don't want to endanger them, but this connection feels important. The scientist considered this question carefully. Continue exactly as you have been. Don't try to feed them or call to them. Simply observe and document. With your permission, I'd like to set up some unobtrusive wildlife cameras in the forest edge, not aimed at your home, but positioned to capture the bear's movements when they visit. Daniel exchanged glances with Emma, who nodded her agreement. As long as the data remains confidential, he said. We don't want tourists or trophy hunters tracking them. Absolutely, Dr. Barrett assured them. This will be a private research project. If we ever publish, all locations will be obscured. She took a sip of coffee, her expression thoughtful. There's something else you should know. Black bears in this region typically keep their cubs with them for about 18 months before the young bears venture off on their own. If this pattern holds true for your bears, the cub will likely stay with its mother through next winter before seeking its own territory. Emma felt a strange pang at this information. The thought of the young bear leaving someday made her surprisingly emotional. When we were taking these photos, Daniel said, changing the subject, it almost seemed like they were posing, like they wanted to be seen. Dr. Barrett smiled. Bears are far more intelligent than most people realize. They can recognize individual humans, remember complex routes through the forest, and solve problems that would challenge many primates. What you're describing, though, that suggests a level of intentionality we haven't documented scientifically. "Buck coming," Noah suddenly announced from his play area, pointing toward the kitchen window with excitement. All 3 adults turned to look. There, at the forest edge, stood the mother bear and her cub, as if they had heard themselves being discussed. "My God," Dr. Barrett whispered, slowly reaching for her camera. This is unprecedented." Emma moved to the window, Noah balanced on her hip. They've never come during the middle of the day before. The mother bear sat calmly at the edge of the yard, watching the house while her cub explored nearby, occasionally standing on his hind legs to get a better view. They're displaying absolutely no signs of stress or aggression, Dr. Barrett noted, snapping photos with trembling hands. The mother is completely relaxed. Look at her ears, forward and relaxed. Eyes calm, she's comfortable here. Noah bounced excitedly in Emma's arms. Ba, ba, hi, ba. To everyone's astonishment, the mother bear tilted her head at the sound of Noah's voice, as if she recognized it specifically. Dr. Barrett lowered her camera slowly. This challenges everything we think we know about bear-human interactions, she said softly. May I? Would it be all right if I set up my equipment now? I'd like to record their behavior. Daniel nodded, unable to take his eyes off the bears. Of course. For the next hour, they watched in amazed silence as Dr. Barrett carefully documented the bear's behavior. The mother bear remained calmly seated at the forest edge, occasionally grooming her cub or huffing softly when he wandered too far. The young bear displayed typical playful behavior, climbing over fallen logs, batting at butterflies, and digging curiously in the earth. They're acting as if this is part of their territory, Dr. Barrett explained quietly. A safe space where they can relax. That's extraordinarily rare near human dwellings. Eventually, the bears departed, melting back into the forest as quietly as they had appeared. Dr. Barrett sat down heavily at the kitchen table, reviewing her footage with an expression of disbelief. What you have here, she said finally, looking up at Emma and Daniel, is potentially groundbreaking. These bears have formed some kind of bond with your family, especially with Noah. I'd like to document this relationship over time, if you're willing. Emma looked at Daniel, who nodded. We'd be honored, she said, but our first priority has to be protecting them. Of course, Dr. Barrett agreed. Conservation is my life's work. Whatever is happening here could change how we understand bear cognition and behavior. It could help us develop better conservation strategies based on coexistence rather than separation. As Dr. Barrett prepared to leave, she paused at the door. There's one more thing you should know, she said, her expression serious. The forest where your bears live isn't fully protected. There's been talk of allowing limited logging in certain sections next year. I've been fighting it, but having documentation of a unique bear behavior in the area might strengthen the case for expanded protection. Emma felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. They would destroy the bear's habitat? Not entirely, but it would fragment it. Fragmentation is one of the biggest threats to bear populations. Dr. Barrett sighed. I'm telling you this because what's happening here isn't just a beautiful connection between your family and these bears. It could be vital to protecting them and others like them. After Dr. Barrett left, Emma and Daniel sat in silence, processing everything they had learned. I never imagined our bear encounters would become part of something so much bigger, Emma said finally. Daniel took her hand. Life has a way of connecting dots we never knew existed. He glanced toward Noah, who had fallen asleep on his playmat, exhausted from the excitement. Our son somehow bridged the gap between our world and theirs. Now we have a responsibility to protect that connection. Emma nodded, a new sense of purpose filling her heart. What had begun as a miraculous morning witnessing a birth had become something far more significant. A mission to protect the forest and the extraordinary bears who had chosen to share their lives with a human family. Summer brought lush greenery and warm, golden evenings to the Montana forest. Dr. Barrett's wildlife cameras had captured fascinatingly consistent behavior from the mother bear and her growing cub. They visited the edge of the Wilsons' property approximately once a week, always spending time near the old oak tree where the cub had been born. Most remarkably, they seemed to recognize the sound of Noah's voice. On several occasions, the cameras recorded the bears perking up their ears and turning toward the house when Noah was playing outside, his laughter carrying through the trees. Noah, now nearly 18 months old, had developed an entire vocabulary centered around the bears. "Ba big" and "ba baby" were phrases he used daily, along with "ba coming," whenever he sensed their presence, often before any of the adults had noticed them. "It's like he has some kind of connection to them that we can't understand," Emma told Daniel one evening as they watched Noah sleeping on the baby monitor. "He always knows when they're nearby." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Barrett thinks it might be that Noah can pick up on subtle sounds or scents that we've learned to filter out. She said children sometimes have heightened senses before they learn to ignore certain stimuli." But Emma wasn't convinced this scientific explanation captured the full truth of what was happening. There seemed to be something deeper, something almost mystical about the bond between her son and the bears. Dr. Barrett had become a regular visitor to their home, often staying in their guest room during her research trips. She had grown close to the family, especially to Noah, who delighted in showing her his growing collection of bear drawings and toys. "The university is fascinated by my preliminary findings," she told them over dinner one evening in late July. "But I've been careful to keep your location private, as promised. I've only shared the behavioral data, not the exact circumstances." "Have you made any progress fighting the logging proposal?" Daniel asked, serving another helping of pasta. Dr. Barrett's expression darkened. "It's complicated. The company has political connections, and they're pushing hard for access. They claim it will be selective logging with minimal impact, but we know that any intrusion fragments habitat and creates stress for wildlife." Emma felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Over the past months, the threat to the forest had become increasingly real to her. "There must be something more we can do." "Actually," Dr. Barrett said, her voice brightening slightly, "there might be. My department is partnering with Nature Vision, that streaming documentary service. They're doing a series on unique wildlife behaviors and human-animal connections. If you were comfortable sharing your story, even anonymously, it could raise awareness about bear intelligence and the importance of habitat preservation." Daniel looked at Emma questioningly. They had been protective of their bear encounters, sharing them only with Dr. Barrett and a few close friends. Going public, even anonymously, felt like a big step. "We'd need to think about it," Emma said carefully. "Our main concern is protecting the bears." "Of course," Dr. Barrett nodded. "Take all the time you need. The series won't begin filming for another month at least." That night, after Dr. Barrett had gone to bed, Emma and Daniel sat on their porch swing, watching fireflies illuminate the darkening forest. "What do you think?" Daniel asked softly. "About the documentary?" Emma sighed, leaning against his shoulder. "Part of me wants to keep this private, to protect what we have. But if sharing our story could help save their habitat..." She trailed off, watching the twinkling lights of the fireflies. "What would it involve, exactly?" "We could set conditions," Daniel suggested. "No filming the bears directly, only the footage we and Dr. Barrett have already captured. No identifying our location. No showing Noah's face on camera." Emma nodded slowly. "That might work. I just worry about Noah. He's so young. Too young to consent to being part of something like this, even anonymously." "We'll protect him," Daniel assured her, squeezing her hand. "And the bears. Whatever we decide, that comes first." As they sat in contemplative silence, a familiar huffing sound emerged from the darkness. Emma and Daniel froze, then slowly turned their gaze toward the forest edge. There, barely visible in the gathering darkness, stood the mother bear. Alone this time, without her cub. "Where's the baby?" Emma whispered, concern immediately filling her voice. Daniel shook his head slightly, indicating he didn't know. The mother bear took a few steps closer to the house than she had ever ventured before. In the dim porch light, they could see something different about her posture. A tension, an urgency that hadn't been present in her previous visits. "Something's wrong," Emma murmured, a chill running down her spine despite the warm evening air. The bear huffed again, pacing back and forth at the edge of the yard, looking directly at them on the porch. "Should we wake Dr. Barrett?" Daniel whispered. Before Emma could answer, the baby monitor on the table beside them crackled to life. Noah's voice came through clearly. "Ba sad, Ba need help." Emma and Daniel stared at each other in disbelief, then back at the distressed bear. "Could it be?" Daniel began, unable to finish the thought that seemed too impossible to voice. Emma stood up slowly, her heart pounding. "She's trying to tell us something about her cub." The mother bear huffed again, more insistently this time, then took several steps toward the forest before looking back at them, as if asking them to follow. "Daniel," Emma said, her voice trembling, "I think she wants us to help her." Dr. Barrett emerged from the guest room, tying her robe around her waist. "What's happening?" she asked, noticing their urgent expressions. "The mother bear is outside," Daniel explained quickly. "Alone. She's acting strangely, pacing, looking at us, and Noah said, 'Ba sad, Ba need help.'" Dr. Barrett's scientific skepticism visibly battled with what she had witnessed over the past months. "It's highly unusual behavior," she admitted, peering through the window at the bear. "She appears distressed." "I think something's happened to the cub," Emma said, her voice tight with worry. "I think she's asking for our help." "That would be unprecedented, Doctor," Barrett began, but stopped as she watched the bear's behavior. "But then again, everything about your bears has been unprecedented." The mother bear huffed again, more urgently, taking a few steps toward the forest before turning to look back at the house. "She wants us to follow her," Emma insisted. Dr. Barrett's professional caution warred with the evidence before her eyes. "If, and this is a significant if, she is trying to communicate with you, we need to be extremely careful. Following a potentially distressed bear into the forest at night is dangerous, even one that has shown peaceful behavior in the past." "But we can't just ignore her," Emma protested. "Not if her cub is in trouble." Daniel, ever practical, was already gathering flashlights from a drawer. "We'll be careful. We'll keep our distance, but Emma's right. We need to at least try to understand what's happening." Dr. Barrett sighed, recognizing the determination in their faces. "Let me get dressed and grab my tranquilizer gun, just as a precaution. And someone needs to stay with Noah." "I'll stay," Daniel offered, though Emma could see how torn he felt. "No," Emma said firmly. "I need to go. I can't explain it, but I feel like she's calling to me specifically." She turned to Dr. Barrett. "You've documented their behavior extensively. Does that seem crazy?" Dr. Barrett considered the question seriously. "Not entirely. Bears can definitely recognize individual humans, and there's growing evidence that some animals seek human help in times of distress. Elephant researchers have documented cases where injured elephants have approached ranger stations for medical assistance." Daniel squeezed Emma's hand. "Be careful. Take the bear spray from the mudroom." Minutes later, Emma and Dr. Barrett stood on the porch, dressed in outdoor gear and armed with flashlights, a first aid kit, bear spray, and Dr. Barrett's tranquilizer gun. The mother bear remained at the edge of the yard, watching them intently. "We maintain a safe distance, Doctor," Barrett instructed. "No sudden movements. If she becomes agitated, we back away immediately." Emma nodded, her throat dry with nervous anticipation. "I understand." As they stepped off the porch, the mother bear huffed softly, then turned and began walking slowly into the forest, pausing to look back as if to ensure they were following. "This is extraordinary, Doctor," Barrett whispered as they carefully tracked the bear's movements, maintaining a respectful distance. "She's deliberately leading us." They followed the bear deeper into the forest, their flashlight beams creating eerie pools of light among the trees. The night was alive with sounds: the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, and always, ahead of them, the steady movement of the mother bear. After about 15 minutes of walking, the bear led them to a small ravine. She stopped at the edge, huffing insistently and looking down into the darkness below. Emma aimed her flashlight into the ravine and gasped. There, at the bottom, lay the bear cub, apparently unable to climb up the steep slope. As the light hit him, the cub whimpered pitifully. "He's trapped," Emma whispered. "That's why she came to us." Dr. Barrett scanned the ravine with her own light. "It looks like he might have fallen. I don't see any obvious injuries from here, but he's clearly struggling to get out." The mother bear made a low, moaning sound that broke Emma's heart. The desperation of a parent for her child transcended species in that moment. "We need to help him," Emma said decisively. Dr. Barrett laid a cautioning hand on her arm. "We need to be extremely careful. The ravine isn't very deep, maybe 12 feet, but the sides are steep, and even a cub can be dangerous if frightened or injured." "What options do we have?" Emma asked, looking for a way down that wouldn't further frighten the young bear. Dr. Barrett assessed the situation with professional calm. "I have a fold-up stretcher in my truck that we use for wildlife rescues. If we can get back to your house and retrieve it, we might be able to create a ramp for the cub to climb up." The mother bear huffed again, pacing anxiously along the edge of the ravine. "Will she understand if we leave and come back?" Emma asked. Dr. Barrett shook her head slightly. "I can't say for certain, but she was intelligent enough to seek human help. That suggests a level of understanding we rarely attribute to wild animals." Emma knelt down, making herself smaller, and looked directly at the mother bear. "We're going to help your baby," she said slowly and clearly, "but we need to get something first. We will come back." The bear stopped pacing and stared at Emma, her dark eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. "We'll return as quickly as we can," Emma promised, feeling slightly foolish talking to a bear, but compelled by the desperation in the animal's behavior. As they turned to hurry back to the house, Emma looked back once. The mother bear remained at the ravine's edge, watching them go but making no move to follow. Something about her posture suggested she understood. They jogged back through the forest, moving as quickly as they safely could in the darkness. When they burst into the house, Daniel was pacing the living room, Noah cradled against his chest. "Bah, help," Noah said immediately, his little face serious. "Bah, baby hurt." Emma and Daniel exchanged a look of amazement, but there was no time to dwell on Noah's inexplicable understanding of the situation. "The cub is trapped in a ravine," Dr. Barrett explained quickly. "I need the portable stretcher from my truck, some rope, and any large tarps you might have." Daniel immediately handed Noah to Emma and sprang into action, helping Dr. Barrett gather the necessary equipment. Within minutes, they had assembled a rescue kit including the stretcher, ropes, tarps, a first aid kit for wildlife, and several bottles of water. "I'm coming too," Daniel said firmly, already pulling on his hiking boots. Emma looked down at Noah, who was watching the preparations with solemn eyes. "We can't leave him alone." "Mrs. Peterson next door," Daniel suggested. "She can come over and stay with him until we get back." 15 minutes later, after their elderly neighbor had arrived to watch over Noah, the three adults made their way back through the forest, moving as quickly as they dared in the darkness. Emma's heart pounded with fear that the mother bear might have given up on them, that they might not find the ravine again in the dense forest. But the bear was waiting exactly where they had left her, standing sentinel at the edge of the ravine. When she saw them approach with their equipment, she huffed softly, as if in relief. "Incredible," Dr. Barrett murmured. "She's still here, still waiting for us." Working quickly but cautiously, they unfolded the stretcher and secured the tarp over it to create a makeshift ramp. Using the ropes, they carefully lowered their creation into the ravine, positioning it against the slope to create an escape route for the trapped cub. The mother bear watched their efforts intently, making no move to interfere, but clearly monitoring every action. When the ramp was secure, she huffed softly toward the ravine, as if encouraging her cub. "Now we wait, Doctor," Barrett whispered, backing away to give the bears space. "If the cub isn't injured, he should be able to climb up on his own." They retreated to what Dr. Barrett deemed a safe distance and crouched down, directing their flashlights to provide enough light for the rescue without shining them directly at the bears. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then they heard scuffling sounds from the ravine. The mother bear made gentle, encouraging noises, and slowly the cub's head appeared at the edge of the ravine as he scrambled up the makeshift ramp. Emma felt tears of relief spring to her eyes as the cub finally heaved himself over the edge and immediately ran to his mother. The mother bear thoroughly sniffed and examined her cub, then began gently grooming him, apparently satisfied that he was uninjured. "A successful rescue," Dr. Barrett whispered, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten as she watched the reunion with misty eyes. What happened next would remain etched in Emma's memory forever. The mother bear, after assuring herself that her cub was safe, turned toward the humans who had helped her. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her massive head in what looked remarkably like a bow of acknowledgement. "My God," Dr. Barrett breathed. I have no scientific explanation for that behavior." The mother bear maintained the pose for several seconds, then gently nudged her cub. Together, they turned and walked away into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The three humans remained rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by what they had witnessed. "She asked for our help," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "She knew we could help her, and she trusted us enough to lead us to her cub." Dr. Barrett shook her head in wonder. "This challenges everything we think we know about bear cognition and behavior. The intentionality, the trust, the gratitude." She turned to Emma and Daniel, her expression serious. "What happened here tonight goes beyond science as we currently understand it. This is something profound." As they gathered their equipment and began the walk back home, Emma felt a deep sense of awe settle over her. The forest around them no longer seemed simply a beautiful backdrop to their lives, but a complex world filled with intelligent beings capable of connection and understanding that crossed the boundaries of species. When they finally reached the house, Mrs. Peterson met them at the door, her kind face worried. "Everything all right? You all look like you've seen a ghost." "Better than a ghost," Daniel said with a tired smile. "We'll tell you all about it tomorrow." After thanking their neighbor and seeing her safely home, they checked on Noah. He was sleeping peacefully in his crib, one arm wrapped around his favorite stuffed bear. "Bah, baby, safe," he murmured in his sleep as Emma gently kissed his forehead. She looked up at Daniel, who had heard it too. "How does he know?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head, beyond questioning the mysteries of their extraordinary situation. "The same way the mother bear knew to come to us for help, I suppose. Some connections don't need words." In the guest room, Dr. Barrett was already making notes about the night's events, her scientific mind struggling to categorize what her eyes had witnessed. "I've decided," she told them when they stopped to say goodnight. "If you're willing, I'd like to proceed with the documentary. What's happening here is too important not to share with the world, for the bear's sake, and for a deeper understanding of the connections possible between humans and wildlife." Emma and Daniel, exhausted but exhilarated by the night's events, nodded in agreement. "Yes," Emma said simply. "It's time to share our story." As they finally crawled into bed in the early hours of the morning, Emma curled against Daniel's side, listening to the sounds of the forest through their open window. Somewhere out there, a mother bear and her cub were safe because of the extraordinary bridge of understanding that had formed between their family and these wild creatures. "Do you think they'll come back?" Daniel murmured sleepily. Emma smiled in the darkness. "I know they will. This is just the beginning." News of the bear rescue spread quickly through scientific circles, thanks to Dr. Barrett's meticulous documentation and reputation. By August, a small film crew from Nature Vision had arrived to begin work on the documentary, now titled The Language of Bears, An Extraordinary Interspecies Connection. True to their agreement, the crew respected the Wilsons' privacy and the bears' safety. They used only footage already captured by Daniel and Dr. Barrett, conducted interviews inside the house, and never attempted to directly film or approach the bears. The location remained confidential, identified only as a forest in the northern Rockies. Emma found herself becoming increasingly comfortable sharing their story. At first, it felt too personal, too sacred to share, she explained during her interview. But we've come to understand that what's happening here isn't just about our family or these specific bears. It's about reconsidering how we view our relationship with the natural world. Daniel's photographs and videos of the bears had captured moments of such obvious intelligence and intentionality that even the most skeptical scientists were taking notice. The footage of the mother bear bowing to her human rescuers had sparked particular interest and debate in wildlife behavior circles. Some of my colleagues are suggesting it was just a coincidence, that she was simply lowering her head to sniff the ground, Dr. Barrett told them one evening as they reviewed the day's filming. But those of us who were there know what we saw. There was a purpose in that gesture, a clear acknowledgement. Noah had become a central figure in the documentary, though his face was never shown on camera. The production team was fascinated by his apparent ability to sense the bear's presence and emotional states. They recorded his voice saying, "Bah coming," just moments before the bears would appear at the forest edge, a phenomenon that occurred with uncanny regularity. Children often possess a sensitivity to the natural world that adults have lost, one wildlife psychologist suggested in the film. Their minds aren't yet constrained by rigid categories of what's possible and impossible in terms of communication across species. As filming progressed, the threat to the forest became an increasingly central element of the documentary. The logging company had moved forward with their proposal, submitting final plans that would allow them to begin operations in certain sections of the forest by early spring. "This isn't just about two bears anymore," Dr. Barrett explained on camera. "This is about preserving habitat corridors that allow all wildlife to thrive. The remarkable behavior we're documenting here demonstrates why these forests deserve protection. Emma found herself becoming more involved in the conservation effort, speaking passionately during her interviews about the need to preserve wild spaces. "Before all this happened, I appreciated nature in an abstract way," she told the camera. "Now, I understand that we're part of an interconnected web. What happens in these forests affects all of us." The mother bear and her cub continued their regular visits throughout the filming, seemingly undisturbed by the occasional presence of the small crew inside the house. They never approached when strangers were outside, however, maintaining their distance whenever anyone beside the Wilsons was in the yard. "They're making choices about who they trust," Dr. Barrett observed. "That's sophisticated decision-making." One morning in late August, Emma was in the kitchen with the documentary's director, Laura, discussing the structure of the final film. Noah played on the floor nearby, arranging his toy animals in a careful circle. Suddenly, Noah stood up. "Ba coming, Ba bringing friend." Emma and Laura exchanged glances. "Friend?" Emma asked, moving to the window. Sure enough, the mother bear and her cub were emerging from the forest edge. But this time, they weren't alone. A large male black bear followed several yards behind them. "That's unusual," Laura whispered, instinctively reaching for her camera before remembering their agreement not to film directly. "Is that the father, maybe?" Emma suggested, watching in amazement as the three bears settled at the edge of the yard. The male kept his distance from the others, his posture alert but not aggressive. "Male bears don't typically stay with the family unit," Laura said, her documentary researcher's knowledge coming to the fore. "They don't participate in child-rearing like female bears do." Noah pressed his hands against the window. "Ba daddy," he said confidently. "Ba family." Emma called Daniel and Dr. Barrett, who rushed to the window to witness this new development. "This is extraordinary, Doctor," Barrett breathed, quickly setting up her documentation equipment inside the house. "If that's the father, his presence here defies typical black bear social structures. Males usually avoid females with cubs, except during mating season." "Could it be a different male?" Daniel asked, snapping photos through the window. Dr. Barrett studied the new bear carefully. "Possibly, but the mother and cub seem completely comfortable with him. There's no sign of tension or fear." They watched in fascination as the three bears settled into what looked remarkably like a family grouping. The mother bear lay down in the dappled shade, the cub playfully climbing over her, while the male bear sat upright nearby, his vigilant gaze sweeping the surroundings as if standing guard. "They're showing us something important," Emma said softly. "Something about their social structure that science hasn't documented before." Dr. Barrett nodded slowly. "Or perhaps this particular family is unique, changed by their interactions with your family, learning new patterns of behavior." Noah watched the bears with obvious delight. "Ba family like our family," he declared, looking up at Emma with his innocent, wise eyes. The significance of this moment wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The documentary had just gained another layer of depth, evidence not just of bear intelligence and cross-species communication, but potentially of bears adapting their social structures in response to their unusual relationship with humans. Laura, the director, sat down heavily on a kitchen chair. "When I took this assignment, I thought we were making a sweet nature documentary about an unusual bear encounter," she said, shaking her head in wonder. "But this is revolutionary. It's changing how we understand wildlife, family structures, interspecies communication." Emma lifted Noah into her arms, watching as he waved happily at the bear family. "That's the message we hope people take from this film," she said quietly. that the boundaries we've created between humans and wildlife are more permeable than we've allowed ourselves to believe. That connection is possible if we approach with respect and openness. As the summer drew to a close and filming wrapped up, the documentary team prepared to depart. The bears continued their regular visits, the male now occasionally accompanying the mother and cub, though he remained more cautious and less interactive than the others. The film will premiere at the Wildlife Conservation Film Festival in New York this October, Laura told them during her final visit. We'd love for you to attend. Anonymously, of course. We can arrange everything to protect your privacy. Emma and Daniel discussed it that night after Noah was asleep. It feels important to be there, Emma said, to see how people respond to our story. Daniel nodded. And it might help the conservation effort. Dr. Barrett says the timing is crucial. The logging decision will be finalized in November. So arrangements were made, carefully protecting the family's identity and their home's location. The documentary would identify them only as a wildlife photographer, his wife, and their young son living in the Northern Rockies. Their voices would remain unaltered, but their faces would be sensitively obscured when they appeared on screen. As September painted the forest in fiery hues of red and gold, Emma often found herself standing at the window, watching the bears during their increasingly frequent visits. The cub had grown substantially since that first miraculous morning, but he still displayed the playful curiosity that had first endeared him to the family. I wonder if they know something's changing, she said to Daniel one evening, as they watched the bear family retreat into the darkening forest. If they sense that their story is about to be shared with the world. Daniel wrapped his arms around her waist. Whatever happens next, we've been part of something extraordinary, something that's changed us forever. Emma rested her head against his shoulder. And hopefully it will change others too. Help them see what's possible when we quiet our fears and open ourselves to connection. In his room upstairs, Noah slept peacefully, his dreams filled with bears and forests, and a world where the boundaries between species dissolved into something more beautiful and complex than anyone had imagined possible. The mother bear, her growing cub, and the watchful male settled into their den for the night, just a mile from the Wilson home. Under the same moon, two families, one human, one bear, shared the forest and a connection that defied explanation, but existed nonetheless, powerful and undeniable. The Wildlife Conservation Film Festival in New York buzzed with excitement on the night The Language of Bears premiered. Emma and Daniel sat in the back row, their identities carefully protected, Noah sleeping peacefully between them. They watched in wonder as their extraordinary story unfolded on the screen before a packed audience. The footage was breathtaking, the mother bear giving birth under their oak tree, Noah's laughter bridging an ancient divide, the rescue in the ravine, the bow of gratitude, the male bear joining the family unit. Dr. Barrett's scientific commentary provided context, while the Wilsons' heartfelt interviews gave the film its emotional core. When the credits rolled, the audience rose in a standing ovation, many wiping tears from their eyes. The film had touched something deep in each viewer, a recognition of the profound connections possible between humans and the natural world, if only we were open to them. As the lights came up, a representative from the Forest Protection Coalition approached the stage. I'm pleased to announce, she said, her voice ringing through the hushed auditorium, that in light of this extraordinary documentation, the logging permits for the Northern Rockies forest featured in this film have been suspended pending further review. The coalition has raised sufficient funds to purchase a significant portion of the threatened land as a permanent wildlife sanctuary. The audience erupted in cheers. Emma clutched Daniel's hand, tears streaming down her face. Their bears would be safe. The forest would be protected. In the months that followed, the language of bears became a global sensation, winning awards and sparking intense debate in scientific, conservation, and philosophical circles. Schools began showing it to children, inspiring a new generation to see wildlife not as separate from humanity, but as intelligent beings worthy of respect and protection. Letters and emails poured in from around the world, many from people sharing their own stories of unexpected connections with wild animals, moments of recognition or understanding that had previously seemed too strange or mystical to share. Back in Montana, the Wilsons continued their quiet life at the edge of the forest, now part of the newly established Bear Bridge Wildlife Sanctuary, named in honor of the connection their family had formed with the bears. Winter came again, the bears retreating to their den for hibernation. Noah, now approaching his second birthday, pressed his hands against the window each morning, watching for his friends despite Emma's explanations about hibernation. "Ba sleeping," he would say knowingly. "Ba come back when flowers grow." And when spring finally returned to the forest, so did the bears, mother, cub, and the male who had joined their unconventional family. The cub had grown remarkably during the winter months, becoming more independent but still playfully curious about the human family who had become part of his world. One warm May morning, as Emma sat on the porch with Noah, watching the bears at the forest edge, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. What had begun as a frightening encounter, a wild predator giving birth in their yard, had blossomed into something extraordinary. A bridge between species, a lesson in connection, a testament to the intelligence and emotional capacity of creatures humans had too often dismissed as merely wild. Dr. Barrett, now the director of the new research center at the sanctuary, had documented dozens of cases of unusual bear behavior throughout the protected forest. Signs of increasing comfort around respectful human observers, complex family groupings previously undocumented in black bears, and even instances of bears appearing to intentionally communicate with humans through body language. "Your bears started something revolutionary," she told the Wilsons during a visit. "They're changing how we understand wildlife behavior, and more importantly, how humans see their place in the natural world." As the years passed, Noah grew from toddler to child to teenager, his special connection to the bears never fading. The original mother bear and her family remained a constant presence in their lives, even as new generations of cubs were born and grew in the protected forest around their home. On Noah's 18th birthday, the family sat together on their porch, watching a new generation of bear cubs playing at the forest edge under the watchful eyes of their mothers. "Do you remember," Emma asked her son, "any of those early moments with the bears?" Noah smiled, his eyes reflecting the same wisdom and compassion they had held as a child. "Not specific memories," he admitted, "but I remember the feeling, like they were family, like there was no separation between us and them, just different ways of being in the world." Daniel, his hair now streaked with silver, nodded thoughtfully. "That's the message people took from our story, that the boundaries we create between species are human constructs, not natural laws. And those boundaries can be crossed with respect and openness," Emma added, watching as a mother bear gently guided her cubs through a patch of wildflowers. The sun began to set over the sanctuary that had grown from their extraordinary encounter, painting the forest in hues of gold and amber. In the deepening twilight, the bears and humans shared the peaceful moment, separated by species but connected by something more profound. A recognition of the intelligence, emotion, and capacity for connection that exists in all living beings. As darkness settled over the forest, Emma thought about the incredible journey that had begun that spring morning so many years ago. One bear had chosen their yard as a safe place to give birth. One human baby had laughed instead of feared. And in that moment, a bridge had formed between worlds that many believed could never connect. That bridge had saved a forest, changed scientific understanding, and inspired countless humans to see the wild with new eyes, not as something separate and alien, but as a community of intelligent beings with whom connection was not just possible but natural. The bears returned to their forest as the stars emerged overhead,